Good afternoon, everyone. This is Susan Patrick with Stam on S, and welcome to our October Virtual Vision Vantagepoint User Group meeting. I am so excited to be here today. I feel like I have not seen you guys forever, and I realized this morning that it has been 2 months because we missed September because of Insight. So I'm happy to be here today. We're going to try to get through the news and updates and stuff quickly because we have a lot of great content for you today, but we also have a lot of great things coming up just globally at Stam on S. So I want to make sure I get through that as well. So first and foremost, we always have several hundred people attending these, so everybody is muted upon entry. If for some reason at some point during the meeting your audio goes out, it may be on your end. You can ask. Sometimes it's better to call in. Sometimes computer audio might go out on you. So the housekeeping items pertaining to GoToWebinar, I know today it's like we use so many of these tools. GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting, WebEx, Teams. Oh my gosh. It's hard to remember and keep them all straight. So a couple things here. You can use the arrow pointing to the right, the red arrow, to kind of get the pesky little panel off of your screen, give you a little bit more real estate. Number two will blow things up a little bit for you, not literally, figuratively on your screen, so that you can see as much as possible. I joke, you raise your hand, but I don't pay attention to that. What I do pay attention to, though, is the questions panel. So if you have any questions or anything for us during the event today pertaining to the topics today, please put that in the questions panel. If we don't get everything addressed during our meeting, I will make sure that we will get back to you personally. And then the other thing is that the slide deck, the handouts are available. I know they weren't up there a minute ago, but Kaylee was so great in getting them up there. So the PowerPoint slides are available for you under the handout section. So again, I'm Susan Patrick, and today I have two beautiful ladies. I'm so excited because this is their first time. So excited for them to be joining us. We have Sherry and Laura presenting on their respective topics, and as always, we have the lovely Kaylee keeping us all on the straight and narrow, and that is a tough job, especially today. I think I'm a little discombobulated. We're going to walk through things. Again, I'm going to cover the upcoming events and any updates, and then we're going to get into best practices for time and expense, invoice approvals or best practices with billing, and some billing tips and maybe challenges. Questions, again, get those in that questions panel, and remember to fill out the survey. I read it through it after every meeting. Your feedback is invaluable to me. I really appreciate your comments, feedback on future items, and so on. So let us know what we can do. I'm going to crank through these next few slides pretty quickly because we have a lot going on here at Stam on S. I was shocked when I had Kaylee pull these slides together for me. A lot of great webinars. So here next week we have security in the cloud, pretty important these days. Then we do have a number of individuals that are going to be at the ACEC Fall Conference. Our very own Wayne Owens will be there, and he's going to be in a panel. And we also have some of our other team members be hanging out there at that conference. So wish I could be there at Marco Island, but I guess I didn't get picked this time. We got fundamentals of firm valuation. We're seeing firms, needing to kind of understand where their company stands and their valuation. So this is a webinar. I'm not sure who on our team is doing this. Very possible it might be Glenn or someone else. But again, great information that our team is getting out to you. And then this was a fun one, right? Trick or treat. Year-end planning recommendations. Last 2 years have been a little bit rocky for all of us. A lot of different tax changes and legislation and regulations. So don't miss this webinar, kind of help keep you in the know pertaining to taxes. And then we got some BD stuff going on. So we got business development planning, the anticipatory approach. We do a lot of things in Stam on S where we're always future or forward looking, being anticipatory, so to speak. So here's some things that will be shared regarding business development. And then continuing into November, kind of odd saying mid-November, the top 5 financial metrics for AE firms. And then we also have on November 11th R&D tax credit, year-end saving strategies. Probably Tom Mao presenting. We don't have that listed here, but whether it's Tom or someone else on our great R&D team, it's going to be valuable information for you. And then last but not least, we have our next virtual user group meeting on November 17th. I have some tentative topics that I'm not ready to share yet, but they should be published soon. And then a key item, and I'll remind you in November and December as well, that starting in 22, these meetings will start at 2. So that'll be the theme, right? In 22, these meetings are going to shift a half an hour, and we're going to start at 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll still go a full hour, but we're going to start at 2 instead of 1:30. The Deltek Clarity study, I've been seeing a lot of downloads from our website for the 42nd annual Deltek Clarity study with the key metrics and so on. I think about 6 or 8 this morning alone. So if you don't have your copy, you can get it on our website using the link that's listed here. And then a couple other reminders pertaining to Deltek. Deltek has town halls quarterly for all of their products. Here are the 2 listed for Vision and Vantagepoint. So you got Vision on December 8th, Vantagepoint on December 9th. You can always check out all of their town halls and register at info.deltek.com at the customer town hall. And then as we talk about the transition or the upgrade to Vantagepoint, I'm out of control here. One of the things that you want to make sure that you're doing is, as you're preparing for Vantagepoint, is participating in Deltek's CAP programs, the Client Assistance Programs. They are, I think, having 3 in 2022, and here are the first 2 listed, Session 11 in February and Session 12 starting in April. So you can go ahead and sign up in advance so you can get that on your calendar to participate in that. We highly encourage it. And for any of you that are in the Deltek Cloud, here are the upcoming dates for upgrading to Vantagepoint. Again, you have to opt in advance to take advantage of these dates. I was trying to get some clarification on this November 19th. Actually, it's closed. You probably can't register at this point. I think originally it was the 12th. Somebody told me it might have been the 19th. So those of you that are in it know when it is. Those of you that aren't, I think it's too late to sign up anyway. So if you're wanting to do it this year, you got December 3rd, and then January and February are posted at this point. So hopefully I got through that fast enough and didn't make your head spin. As always, we're going to start off with a poll. I've included them in the slides so I don't forget them this time. Getting a little sneaky here. So Kaylee, if you can bring up the first poll, and we're trying to kind of get a lay of the land as we're going into things today as to what system you're using in the moment and if you're kind of close to going to Vantagepoint. So as I'm watching the polls kind of come in here, it looks like about 70% have voted. This is some interesting statistics. As we're kind of coming in here, it's neck and neck for those that are on Vision and already on Vantagepoint. We're about 34 Vision, 36% Vantagepoint, and then we're neck and neck on those that are looking at 6 months versus 12 months. And we got no one, and this is fantastic, no one saying that it's not even on your radar. So that is music to my ears. So Kaylee, I think you can go ahead and close that poll and show everyone the results. And while we're kind of flipping that again, neck and neck, Vision Vantagepoint. This is so awesome, folks. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip things over to Sherry. Sherry's going to kick us off today. Thank you again, Sherry, for presenting on time and expense. And just go ahead and make you the presenter.
Yep.
There we go. We can see your
Are you
screen.
seeing the correct screen? Okay, great.
Yes,
fantastic.
Thank you,
Susan.
So I'm going to put myself on mute because my dog's going crazy.
I always enjoy seeing the poll results. I like to know where everyone is along their software journey, if you will. So I'm going to jump right in here because, again, we have a lot of material to cover, and I don't want to cut any of Laura's time because she has some very exciting and very important billing information. So I'm going to jump in here really quick, and I'm just going to say that, timesheets, expense reports, and transfers during billing, I know that these are always the highlight of everyone's conversation, right? Okay, back to reality. I don't think it's a secret that these topics are pain points across almost every industry, because our billable employees, our engineers, architects, accountants, attorneys, whatever the industry, they would much rather spend their time working on client projects instead of working on administrative items like timesheets and expense reports and approvals and billing, right? And we can't fault them for that, can we? I mean, billable work is what keeps the company going. So what can we do as the accountants, or the supportive staff, or just the firm wide? What can we do to help them spend less time on these areas and still do it accurately in order to keep accounting from hassling them about late approvals and incorrect postings and billing timelines? Again, I've worked in the AE industry, and I know that my engineers from the past life would dream of days that they didn't have to talk to accounting. But before we begin, let's start off with a poll. And Susan or Kaylee, can you please pop that up? This is just to get a feel of how often do we have delays in getting timesheets and expense reports posted and approved and all of that fun stuff. Every week is what we're seeing there, and whew, I feel like that's a spotlight into my past life. That's and that's a common thing that we find. So
every week is winning.
Yes, it is.
Seeing very little in the rarely, nothing in the never.
And I will say that if anyone says rarely, or those of you that do say rarely, we want to know what your secret is, because hopefully that secret isn't that accounting does all the work to make sure it's correct, because we might want to have a conversation. I am excited to see that there's no one saying no paper timesheets and paper expense reports, because if someone was saying that, then we would need to have a totally different conversation.
Well, at one point somebody picked that and they pulled it back. So Kaylee, go ahead and show us the overall results. Fantastic. There's your audience.
Good. Every week. Okay. Every week. So we all have the same pain, right? So, and I just want to confirm that it is back to my screen and you're seeing everything okay. That we have some common errors.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, great. Some common errors that cause some of those delayed timesheets or delayed postings is they're just keying their time in the wrong project or phase or task. Or, how many times have we seen a comment that with the timesheet entry that says move to XYZ project when it's open in Vision? Well, if it's not open, then maybe we need to address why we're putting time, or we have time on a project that's not open, right? Or time's entered in the wrong period, or some expense examples of they didn't attach the receipt, or it's the incorrect mileage in the system, or it's the incorrect mileage for the project that they're working on. And some other delays, or empty or incomplete timesheets, or they just forget to submit it, or they can't find their receipts. Well, little plug here for mobile apps, because if your company hasn't implemented the mobile apps, this could help you with those areas, because everyone has a cell phone at their fingertips these days, right? No comments is not really necessarily an error or a delay, but it's a very important discussion topic, especially if you have FAR audits or other reporting or invoicing requirements, especially when you work with government contracts or items like that you really need to have those comments. And then what's the result of those errors and delays? As we mentioned, the whole point of the poll, right, was how often do we have trouble getting time and expenses posted on time? Well, it's a trickle-down effect, right? Late time entry and posting leads to late issuance of draft invoices, which lengthens or makes the billing cycle late, so on and so forth, and down the road. And a lot of times, if you have those employees that are rushing to get their time entered at the very end, right before posting, before they get that nasty gram or 3 calls from accounting that we need to post time to get billing done, well, they might be rushing to get their time in, which means that they have incorrect time entered. It goes on the wrong project, which leads to missing or incorrect billings, which causes voids and reissues of invoices, which increases the workload for accounting, which pushes out the timeline of getting invoices to the client, which leads to deadlines or missing deadlines of the client for invoice dates, which again rolls down and down and down to extending out the time that you actually collect on that cash. Or you may just miss revenue altogether because it didn't get entered correctly and you missed time or missed expenses. And another one there that says, no backup for invoices or audits. How many times have you had auditors ask you for backup to an invoice? The response of, we don't have a receipt, that typically doesn't go well, right? That's not what the auditor wants to hear. Me speaking as a former auditor, I've had to ask that question a lot of times to clients, and I've also been on the receiving end of those questions, and it's never a fun conversation to have. So again, delayed billings or large number of transfers, which is something we're going to talk about here in a little bit, which, that delays invoices as well. And the bottom one, just, I have to throw that in there because I'm an accountant by trade, and we're always told we're frustrated or grumpy, and well, accounting always gets a bad rap. But, what's the saying? If you would have done what I told you to, when I told you to do it, or the way that I told you to do it, I wouldn't be nagging you. Or wait, am I confused? Is that just related to spouses and children? Or anyway, we'll move on. So what's the best way to take care of transfers or changes to time and expense records? Well, in a perfect world, we would just eliminate it, right? We wouldn't need to make those transfers or changes. But if everyone entered their time and expenses correctly and entered and approved them timely, well, why am I here? We wouldn't be having this discussion, right? But it happens, and to err is human. Everyone has things that they do that someone else might be waiting on, that takes a little longer to move the process along. So what do we do to fix that? Or how do we fix these errors? Or better yet, how do we reduce the frequency of errors? So how about we have meaningful project names? Make it easy to spot when you're entering time to make sure you get the right project. For example, using I-70, I-270, or I-55 exchange. Now, without Googling, can anybody tell me where that is? Probably not. Sorry, I live in Illinois, so I had to represent there because I know a lot of people are East Coast, so I got to give the Midwest some love. But just to be clear, so we would use I-70, I-270, or I-55 exchange for a project name instead of something like IDOT, Region 5, District 8, work order number 153268. If you're working on 10 IDOT projects, are you really going to be able to keep the work order number straight? And that's really, decreases the amount of accuracy probably when you're entering your time. Or how about just putting a phase or task in order that makes sense? Should we see construction as our phase 1, or should design be first? Because typically you have to design before you can lead down and get into construction, right? Or what about using schematic design instead of 25% completion? Just trying to make it clear and concise and easy to find. Or keeping the projects and phases inactive when they're complete so that extra time can't be added to a job that should be closed. Or if you're waiting for a notice to proceed on a DOT project, don't even open it up or make it active until you have that notice to proceed and you can actually put time on that project. Expense reports, 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and what purpose. Why do we have this expense? The auditor is going to ask for it, so it's just easier to have that up front, right? Expense reports are very hard, especially when you have meals or all those other areas that require extra scrutiny because of FAR audits or other invoicing that clients may ask about it. So just they're going to ask for it. It's just easier to have that up front than trying to remember a year down the road what this expense was for. And just other tips: using time and expense apps. Again, another plug for the mobile apps. You have your receipts at your fingertips if you just snap a picture of it. Floor checks if you can start reviewing time before they're submitted to catch what needs to be corrected before we get to the posting point of making corrections. Or maybe even try to implement something that says, hey, if I have a repeat offender on getting expense reports turned in or submitted in a timely manner, maybe we make those people get a paper check instead of a direct deposit for reimbursement, right? Maybe if they continue to get paper checks for large expense reports, maybe they'll start getting them in on time and in a timely fashion so that then they can have a direct deposit. So in that, I'm going to lead to a next poll here, just to kind of see how you handle timesheets and expense reports that are posted that are incorrect. I see it out there.
All right, come on, people vote.
Yeah, I was gonna say, goodness, it wasn't moving.
or these answers too wordy. You had to read them. It's not like a trick question like when you were in high school and you're taking your exams and you have to read it 3 times because it's a trick question.
I will say undo posting makes me cringe. Oh no, there's an undo posting. Okay.
We're going to call you later, so you better remove that vote.
It just makes me cringe. I'm not saying that it can't be used sometimes, but you really, really, really have to know what you're doing and what things are affected when you do undo posting. There's a lot of things that people don't realize are affected when you do that. It's not just the item that you're working on. There's a lot of other things because so many things are interconnected. And we do get a lot of requests for help and corrections related to undo postings. Not best practice.
All right. Well, I think you can show the results, Kaylee, and I'm not wholly surprised here.
Good.
Because yeah, transfer and interactive billing is
Good.
certainly the easiest place. So have at it, Jerry.
Great, great. So, just a few things, and I will touch on that poll in a second here, but I'm just going to say, you know, best practice is to enter time correctly, right? To get it correct on the timesheet, get it correct on the expense report at the initial installation of that entry, you know, when the employee does it. So you have a proper audit trail also. There is the option of accounting timesheets that could be an entry form if it's a missed post. We missed something and it didn't get in, or anyway, lots of different reasons that this could be used, but just another option in Transaction Center. Transaction entry that would be done by accounting. Again, similar to timesheet entry, preferred is timesheet entry by the employee for the audit trail. Employee expenses is an option too. You can see that on the list on the left. There are labor adjustments. If there is a correction that needs to be done, you can do a labor adjustment and it will take care of it. However, you must remember that you have to have all 3 columns filled out. You can't just change the hours or you can't just change the billing amount. You have to change the hours, you have to change the regular amount, which is the cost, and you have to change the billing amount for the project that is being corrected, meaning the hours, the cost, and the billing is being removed, which is the negative line. And then also on, you know, you still need to have those 3 items for the correct job where you are moving that time and those hours, you know, those hours that cost and that amount. Very, very important if you do labor adjustments, make sure you have all 3. Excuse me. And then as the poll indicated, best practice, this is the one we really, really like to see if you have to make corrections, is transfer that to the correct job through interactive billing. Things to keep in mind or that are very important to remember is that comment box, because again, as we've indicated, comments are so important. You had conversations or we've had presentations on FAR audits and you know, just client requirements to where those are needed. So make sure you get that comment in there. And then I always like to touch and say that transfer reason. Please make sure it's relevant and make sure that it makes sense. Doesn't have to be wordy, doesn't have to be long, just make sure that it is very good, very relevant and makes sense. So, because it could be something that the auditor might ask for or something that you need to find out down the road why it was transferred. Now, I am going to jump off because I believe I've gone a little bit over my time and I really don't want to hold Laura up. So I am going to let it switch off to the poll because I believe that is next to start out Laura's presentation. Thank you. And if you have questions, please let us know.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead. Kaylee, if you want to pull up the next poll, and while you're doing that, I will go ahead and switch things over to Laura as the presenter. So do you use invoice approvals in the system today? So Laura, as you're kind of queuing things up over there, there is a number that are not, but they would love to. So you're going to wow them that they can't wait to do it. And then we got 28% or so saying yes and 59 saying no, and a few aren't sure. So they may not be in that area of the organization. So Kaylee, you can go ahead and close that out and show us what you got. There's your folks today, Laura.
Okay. And are you gonna?
you should be presenter. Did
There
I
we
flip it
go.
to you?
Yep, we got it.
All right,
There
so
we
we're
go.
seeing your,
All right.
there we go, perfect.
We've got it. Okay. All right, so yes, we're going to talk about invoice approvals, and it looks like there's a lot of you that are very interested in this topic. We've only got probably 30 minutes, and it's a lot to cover, so I will just jump right in, and let's get going. Let's see. So our typical current process for invoice approvals is we usually have AR running batch invoices. Typically, maybe they're doing it a little bit before the month end, maybe they're running it around the 5th of the month. They're emailing those invoices out to their project managers. There's some email back and forth between those to make corrections, to get changes. That's all outside of the system. And then eventually, maybe if we're lucky, 5 days later, that's finalized. And then we're going in and we're going to interactive billing. We're recreating that invoice and we're sending that out to the client. One big flaw in this process is that time gap between when it was sent out for approval and when it was finally approved. You can have a full weeks of new transactions in there that may need to be on that invoice. So this invoice approval process helps capture that. What this does when we're using these invoice approvals is it's really going to speed up that invoice processing. It's going to better organize and it's going to automate the system with sending out those alerts for you. And then it will also send out reminder alerts. Hey, I haven't heard back from you. It's going to retain that history of communication around approving the invoice. So we don't have any more he said, she said. That's all in the system. No, you told me to approve that. It also allows delegation of the approver if they're absent. So that's a very easy step to jump in and switch that delegation process. So those are kind of some of the benefits, which means that this is our typical process flow. We've got submitting the invoice. As soon as the biller submits the invoice, then an alert is automatically sent. So there's no tagging in the invoice to an email anymore. The PM just gets an alert. They get access to that invoice within either Vantagepoint or Vision. They're going to go in, depending on their security rights, they can even edit that invoice directly. They're going to approve it. Again, it's just going to be a straight alert back to the biller. No need to attach anything to an invoice. The biller's going to get it. They're going to finalize it, and then they're going to send it out to the client. So it does take out several steps in the process. The first thing that we need to do to get this up is this is not automatically configured in your system, so you do have to configure this. So we're going to walk through the steps, and what we're going to do, we're going to walk through configuring it in Vision, and then we're going to walk through configuring it in Vantagepoint, and then when we're done, I'll show you some live info in Vantagepoint. So here's the steps in Vision. So in Vision, we're going to configuration, billing, general, and then we're finding this on that miscellaneous tab to enable invoice approvals. And it will need you to put in a default approval process, and there is a default in the system, and I'd suggest you just pick the default for now. You can always change that later. And when you do this, you don't need to worry that suddenly everything is turned on. You still have to go in project by project. So you can go in and turn this on, and it's not going to suddenly switch your system over. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is setting up that approval process. So again, there's a default. Suggest you would start with that. In Vision, it's usually something like this, where you've got your biller that is then sending the alert is going to the PM. Usually per session means they're going to get the whole batch at once, so they're not going to get an alert for every single invoice. They might have 5 invoices, they don't get 5 separate emails. Typically for a PM, it's going to go by email. If you guys are an organization that's really good with your dashboard, you can change that. It can go straight to the dashboard. When they approve, it usually comes back to the biller. Again, either dashboard or email, per invoice or per session. And then, so that's kind of the steps there. You're just going to configure that basic. You can set up different approval processes if you need them for different organizations, different preferences, but typically just use that default. All right, and then like I said, this is the last step in here. Just because you turn it on in the system doesn't mean it's turned on for the project. So to use this, you do actually have to go into your project, and it's in your billing terms on the miscellaneous tab. And then you've got this enable invoice approvals. And again, here you can choose which process you're going to use. When you're just starting out, you're probably going to have just that default process. You can always set this up in your default billing terms so that it's done with new projects, but that's how you turn that on. In Vision, exact same thing. So exact same steps again. Billing options, turn on invoice approvals, use your default process. Just looks different in Vantagepoint. This one is a big difference in Vantagepoint to the other, because this invoice approval process that you need to turn on, you have to do that in the desktop application. So when you're launching Vantagepoint, you're getting this option to launch web application or launch desktop application. If you're not seeing this launch desktop application, you're not using Microsoft Edge. You do have to use Microsoft Edge to launch the desktop application. You don't need it for the web application. Chrome is fine, but to do this step, you do need to be in Edge. So here, launch your desktop. This is what Vantagepoint desktop looks like. You're going to go down to your settings, billing, and invoice approval process. And then you're going to flip back into the web browser and configure that again in your billing terms. This time in Vantagepoint, your billing terms, kind of that miscellaneous tab in the overview is kind of over here in this summary pane. So look over here to actually turn on those processes. So over here to enable those, and then here's the default. Okay, so those are the steps in getting that configured. Next step is actually processing these. So let's start with how do you actually submit these? And in invoice, typically you're going to go, I think most people start with batch billing. You can always do it with interactive billing if you're doing the one-offs. In batch billing though, as soon as you've configured that, you're going to have a new option that is going to have this checkbox to submit invoices for projects with approvals enabled. So you're going to want to check that when you're doing your batch billing. In interactive billing, it's going to be when you're done, you're going to actually hit submit. So that's it. Vantagepoint, again, same thing. In interactive billing, you're going to hit approve and submit. In batch billing, you now have a radial button that says draft and submit. So same, just different. As I noted before, one of the benefits of this is comments. So as you're doing that draft billing, for example, it's going to pop up and allow you to do a comment at the end. So you could say something like, please get these back to me by Friday. And so you can send that out with the batch. If you're doing it individually in that interactive billing, you can have a specific comment just to that project manager. They can address that back and forth. And then that's saving all of those comments in the record. Moving on to approving the invoices. I know this is a lot of data and I'm going pretty fast because I want to be able to share with you the actual screenshots in Vantagepoint. I'm not seeing any questions that are coming up immediately that we need to get to. So let me just keep going on. Okay, approving invoices in Vision. So in Vision, under billing, there is an invoice approvals window. This window is just going to give you a big summary of the projects that are out there. And you're only going to see this window and see the data in this window if you're authorized on the project. So if you're the named biller, you're going to see it. And if you're the named project manager, you're going to see it. If you're somebody that's not in those roles, so you're a manager that just wants to go in and check where things are, you're not going to see this. So this is for your biller, and your PMs are going to see this information. This is used, maybe you would use this kind of summary view if it's invoices that you're really clear on. So the PM absolutely knows, this is always $10,000 a month, every single month. They can pop this up and they can, see the project name, the amount, and they can just hit approve on this without actually opening the invoice. So I wouldn't expect this to be used very commonly. I would expect most people would be going through interactive approvals. So once this is turned on, there will be a new option under billing that will be interactive approvals. And this is going to look really familiar to all of you that are billers and they're in the process. So that this would be new to the PMs. You'd have to probably walk through this with them a bit. But in here, they're going to have the general tab. This gives them a little bit of history on their projects. So they can see under project fees, they can see what the total fee is, where they've billed so far, and then some of that job to date information that can be very helpful for them as they're trying to make those decisions. And then they have this option for labor and expense as well. So again, as a biller, you recognize this information. They'll now be able to see this themselves, and depending actually on their security rights, they can make adjustments. So what you're seeing on this screen is you're seeing invoice status of submitted. That's what is the biller. They submitted the invoice, and this is what's on the actual invoice preview. And then this is showing new transactions. So you may not want this for new time because that might be in a new, the next month. So you may not want that stuff added, but you really might want that on expenses if somebody realized they didn't turn in an expense report. And so you would see on that expenses tab, you would then see that new as well. And they can add those back onto the invoice themselves just by hitting that include new transactions. And then that will add that to that draft invoice, which can be, I think, very helpful. And again, depending on their security rights. So in this example, under security for that project management role, they've been given the option to bill and to hold. So if they're looking at this, instead of contacting you and saying, hey, take all of Tina's time off of that invoice, they can just do that themselves. They can select all of those rows and they can hit hold. So you don't have that back and forth. And if this happens to be, maybe this is somebody that, a project manager that might be a little bit more experienced and you want to give them some additional rights, they can actually be assigned the rights, just like in the biller information, to write off hours or to transfer them. So they could go in, they could click that button that would then show up in this window to transfer to a different project as well. So that can also take out some steps. That would be something you wouldn't want to just give to any project manager. You'd want to make sure, obviously, that they understand the system and what they're doing with that, and that, if they're writing off things, that they have approval to do that. In Vision, and well, in Vantagepoint as well, but in Vision, one of the things that you need to be really clear on is this is the project manager role, and you need to make sure you've got your settings, your security settings right. So you may do all that configuration and think you're up and running, but then the project manager is going to get in there, try to approve, and they don't have access. So you do need to make sure that you've cleaned up your project manager role access. One of the things you may want to consider giving them is billing terms, making sure that they have access to % complete. That way, when they're over in the interactive approval, and they can click on fees, or they can be on that general tab and they can click update fees, and they can go ahead and change that % complete themselves. So no more of that, you sent it out to them with 25%, they're coming back and saying, actually, we're 50%. They can go in and head and type that 50% themselves. So again, it just really streamlines that process. Heading over to Vantagepoint, this summary screen is the same as in Vision. So again, this one is also called invoice approvals. You've got your, for this case, these are all the ones that are pending. They just select, move back. They just select on a row, they approve or reject, it gives them a chance to put a comment in, and that's all done at that summary level. Again, probably not best practice to do that. In Vantagepoint, over to the right after comments, you would have 3 little dots, and they can just link over to the draft invoice right there, or they can go out and they can come in to here. They have renamed it in Vantagepoint. It no longer is called interactive approvals, and it's no longer located under billing. So in Vantagepoint, you're going to see that under the projects hub, and it's going to be called draft invoice approvals. And there's a little exclamation point there because there is something pending. So in this case, it's similar. They're opening this up. This one, there's an invoice to approve for Oriole Park. And on the general tab, they can see, if we were to have that full in here, you can see the information on there. And let me just go back one more. They've got the same options here, labor expenses, unit fees, all of those same options in Vision to make those changes that we did in there. One nice thing about Vantagepoint is that if you set it up in those billing options, so back in that step 1 when we hit configuration, there was an option for use markup on draft invoices. This came into play starting in Vantagepoint 4.0, and it has improved functionality in 4.5. So depending on your system, you might be in either one of those because they're just starting to upgrade the 4.0s to the 4.5s right now. But if you do have that, this does make it a little easier for the project managers. It allows them, they can't make literal changes on the invoice, but it allows them to mark it up. So they can see that preview like we've got here, and then they can, they can type in some, this happens to be Vantagepoint 4.5. I'll show you what it looks like in 4.0, but in 4.5, there's actually text where they can type right on the invoice. And sorry for the blurry screen, but I think you get the gist of it. They can insert comments in here. They can put their percent complete. They can highlight things here. They can't make any changes here. This is just highlighting. So they still need to go back to the actual, not this draft invoice view, but back to that screen prior where it had the option to do those transfers. So that's what that looks like. I think that's a really nice feature in Vantagepoint. And then one last thing I mentioned that's a benefit here is that approval delegation. So in Vantagepoint, you know, when you're hitting, as a biller, you're hitting and you're sending that all out to all of your PMs. And then what if your PM is out on vacation? What they should do before they head out, they can just go to their My Preferences, which is just up in the top right-hand corner of Vantagepoint. And they can just click that real fast and they can click Delegate Approvals. They can assign a different PM and then all of those go to that other person. And then they can change that when they get back. In Visions, I didn't grab a screenshot for that, but in Vision, it's similar. It's up in that top menu bar under Options. And under Options on the General tab, it will also have that Delegate Approvals feature. So that's in both of them. And from there, you just finalize the invoice. So if there were no corrections, you just go back to interactive billing or batch billing. We're going to talk about that in the tips, but you're just going to go back to that interactive billing. You're going to finalize it. If there were some corrections, you just make those corrections, send it out. And if it was rejected, then you start the process over. And we're not hopping to this poll yet. We're going to show what this looks like in Vantagepoint first. So this view right here, I am logged into Vantagepoint as the project manager. So this is what, as a project manager, I've got access to over here. And these are my invoice approvals under billing. And if you notice right up here under my alerts, I've got two. And if I were to click on that, I've got one draft invoice to do and then also a notification. It's the same thing. So I've got an action item saying go do it and then a notification saying I've got something there. So it does show up there because I've got that set. Instead of sending that alert to my dashboard, I sent it to my notification center. That's how it works in Vantagepoint. Here's my invoice. So I can click on this, and if I know 100%, I'm super confident we're billing them $35,000, I'm gonna just hit approve. I've got my comment in here that the biller sent to me that says please approve by Friday. It could have said whatever, and then I can click these little dots here and I can open and draft invoices, or I can go to Hubs, Projects, Draft Invoice Approvals. So either way, it gets you the same place. Now here's my draft invoice. And in here, I've got my general tab. Again, I've got some basics about this project. None of these are filled in because it's just the demo database. I didn't fill in that data. I just did an invoice for fee. If there was any labor on it, then it would show here, and I assigned this project manager to have full rights. So I gave them the rights to bill, to hold, to write off, to modify, and transfer. So this is somebody that I really trust in this process. Again, I could do a different role for them and not have them have that access. Same thing with expenses. If I had any expenses in here, they would show here. I could make those same changes. Units and then fees right here. I can just click in here, and as a PM, I can say, this 930, actually, we are 50% complete. And I can just change that right on the invoice. I've got an invoice history here. There's no invoice history because this is a new thing for this, but then invoice preview. So it's just going to take a moment to generate. And then again, this is 4.0, so it's going to be just a little bit less in functionality than those of you that have already hit 4.5. It does take a while graphically to pull this up. I did test it and it came up, so we're just going to let it count. Okay, here we go. So these are some edits that I've already made on here. So I went in and I said, I don't want to see billings to date. So I just hit draw and I crossed this off, and then I came over here to my comment to just say, take that off. Fee, I'm just making a comment here, change that. I can highlight things if I want, maybe there's a typo somewhere in something. I could just, highlight in that. You can erase. So this isn't actually making any changes. This is just a visual way that they can see it, and then this is going to go back. And then the biller can open this up. They can see those comments, and they can see that draft, and it's all saved so that we've got the history of what happened in there. Once they're done, then they come up to this approve, and they either approve or reject it. And under here, under other actions, if you recall, I can do, again, I don't have those backup transactions in here, so it's not going to be any good to hit that include new, but this would be, you got the invoice, you realize that, the project manager realized that, oh, I forgot to put that trip on there. They suddenly submit their expense report, it gets posted, they could do this refresh themselves and it's on there rather than going back to the biller and saying, send me a new draft. So it just really streamlines that. So that's what that looks like from the project manager side. Since I know many of you don't typically see that on the biller side, this is typically what we're looking like as the biller. Again, you can see that I've approve and reject is grayed out. I don't have the authority to approve and reject these. So these are the ones that are out there pending with my project managers. These are the statuses, but I can't do anything with them. But that's a good summary so you can kind of keep on track of where you're at. And then if I'm a so this is actually the default admin, so I have rights to everything in this view. And if I go to this invoice approvals, you can see there's actually nothing pending here. So this is what I was talking about before of don't be surprised when you go here and you don't see anything. You might not see it because you are not a biller or a project manager assigned to that project. But that's what that looks like from those 3 different views. Okay, and then let's switch back. So that's kind of the summary. I've got all of that information is in that handout. So hopefully that's enough to kind of walk you through that basics on the project. And again, if you're getting stumped on it, it's probably something in your security settings. And my guess is most likely it's your project manager security settings that you need to take a look at. So that is the invoice approvals process. And then I just wanted to run through a few general tips. And so let's go ahead and hit this poll if we can, because we're going to move on to how do we send invoices out currently. So Kaylee, are you putting that up?
It's up.
Oh, okay. I don't see it on my side. And it's so quiet.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh my gosh, did I just talk to myself for 20 minutes?
you were all by yourself. You were doing great. I didn't want to interrupt.
Please make sure that was not muted. I'm like, I'm just trying. There's so much information here. I'm watching that clock. I'm like, I want to make sure it's all in there.
You're good. So as things are trending here, we got 8% down now to 7% print and snail mail. We got 77% at individual emails, 10% at batch, 5% at other. Curious what that is. And then one person is picking them up on my joke of the day, carrier pigeon.
I'm guessing the other is going to be one of those upload ports where you have to go upload your invoices. All right. Hey, so my tip is going to be helpful for everybody, to 77% of you at least. So
awesome.
All right, so let's go ahead and check out my one. I was trying to do some batch billing tips, and I don't have a whole lot of batch billing tips, but I think this is a great one. So batch billing is actually a great way to email all of your invoices to the client rather than doing them one by one in that interactive billing. So you may not know this because you might not have this set up in your configuration, but in batch billing, in your configuration settings, there is an option that will allow you to finalize invoices in batch billing. So again, through this process, you're probably going to do your draft invoice in batch billing. You're going to go and finalize it, or you're not going to finalize it. You're going to go do the edits as needed in interactive billing, then go back to batch billing and do a final run and have it automatically email out for you. And I'm going to show you what that looks like on the next screen. But again, if you're not seeing that option, it's a configuration option. So here's what it's going to look like in Vision. In Vision, if you have that right, you're going to suddenly see this run type of final run. So when you know your invoices are good, you can hit final run, and then you'll have a box here which you can check for email invoice. So you're going to check that. Just a tip, many of you might have found this out the hard way. I know I have, but when you're emailing directly through Vision, you don't get a copy. That doesn't run through your Outlook. You don't have a copy of what you sent. That's always good practice to blind copy or copy yourself so that you have a copy of exactly what went out when you're sending directly through Vision. So just a tip, make sure you're putting yourself in there. And then you've got your subject line and your message, and it's got these insert field options so that you can customize these a bit, because you're sending these to all, you're sending the big batch of 100 invoices out. So you can customize them a bit with the, their first name, their last name, and some basic information in there. And then just a tip, after you do this, you really might want to save your options so that you're not redoing that blind copy and doing those insert fields each time. But that is how you would set that up, and you would click the final run, and then it's going to send those all out for you. And in Vantagepoint, it's very similar. You are gonna, if you've turned on that option, then you have this option in batch billing to do final run. And you're gonna have, I probably should click this box for you, but you can have the box for email, and then it's gonna let you set up all of that information that we just did on the Vision side. So that's kind of my tip for batch billing that might help make that sending your invoices out a little faster. A few more things that can be just, again, these are just kind of random tips at this point. Refreshing billing extensions. So this is something you may or may not have done before. It can be really handy. It has nothing to do with your invoicing. This has to do with getting your reports right. So let's say you have posted time and expenses to a project, but you didn't set up the billing terms yet. So that time might be in there with a billing value of 0. Maybe your expenses are in there. Maybe you had a default term that was a markup of 15%, but in reality, this client has a markup of 10%. You're going to have fixed all of that in your invoice. So your invoice went out correctly, but your reports are going to be off when you run them. They're not going to have the actual billing amounts in those reports. So billing extensions is how you fix that. It's primarily done for reporting purposes. And just a big caution on this, don't go in and when you open this up, it's going to say all, it's going to have kind of in your selection, it's going to have all projects. Make sure you don't run it for all projects. Just pick small batches or the actual project that you're dealing with. Run that, and then that should alleviate some of those issues you might be seeing in balancing on those reports. One more tip is kind of interactive billing. I think some of us get a little blind to this screen after a while. This is what you're seeing as you pop up. So I just wanted to kind of highlight the different areas on this interactive billing options. Kind of in this area up here is where it actually has the dates that are printing on your invoice. So if you're maybe running your invoice for the end of September, but you're running it for 3 months, instead of having the period start date default to September 1st, you might want to change that default to July 1st, and then it's going to read on your invoice professional fees from that date to the end date. So that's how you get that change on your invoice. This next section is what it says. This is where you get your time and expense details on your invoices, is through that. This right here is where you're getting your fixed fees onto your invoice. So these are a little different. Don't usually use this overhead projects, although you may not realize this. Sherry talked about transferring time in interactive billing. You may not know that you can transfer time from your overhead projects and your promotional projects in interactive billing. So let's say something has consistently been put on an overhead account. You could actually come in here and you could give a period start date. You could pull up that overhead account, and then you would see those transactions and you could transfer them to a project in here. So that's what that would be used. It would be really uncommon to use that though. And so again, just make sure you're kind of paying attention to your interactive billing options. That's what they're doing. And then just the last thing that I had for you, because this is going to be a bit of a change if you're using invoice approvals, I don't want you to get thrown by this error message that might pop up on you. So if you have done an invoice and you have submitted it, then that PM might be reviewing that. You can't just go in there and make changes like you typically do. So typically you'll do the batch, you'll just pop into interactive billing and you'll start making changes. This is probably going to give you that error saying you can't do that, it's been submitted. So it's just that's all that error is telling you. You just need to go in and unsubmit the invoice, make the changes, and resubmit. So that's something you knew that you're going to run into as you use this process. And that's it for me. So I will turn it back to you, Susan, for any questions.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I see we have just a few minutes left in our time today. I was just going to look through here quickly to see if there's anything that possibly you can show. And you may not have this in our demo, but in the demo database, in Vantagepoint. Do you have anything that's in the historical? I know our demos are often quite lacking in the information that's available.
I am muted, and I was reading those. What? Tell me that. Where would you like me to go again, Susan?
Yeah, so in a project for draft invoices where you can see the past ones.
Oh, to be able to transfer.
Yeah.
No, I could not, and I tried to post some transactions, and in our demo database, we didn't have the a feature set up that would allow me. So I am so sorry, I cannot show you.
That's okay.
That.
I know the joys of working in a demo database where you don't always have everything staged that you need staged. So that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'll pop, but I'm pretty sure I don't. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Not a problem. Not a problem. Okay. I think what we'll probably do, there are some questions left in the questions, but there is quite a number of them. So I think probably the best thing to do is that we'll just kind of take those and we will respond to those individually. So don't worry, folks. We will get to your questions. But for sake of time, because sometimes what happens is I get so engrossed in answering these questions, and then I lose track of time, and then we're past the half an hour.
Yes.
So I don't want to do that. I want to wish everybody a happy rest of your month, and we will see you again in November. So thank you, ladies. You did amazing on your first time. So now that you got the rhythm, I'm sure we'll see you more often. So Kaylee, you can go ahead and close out. Don't forget to fill out the survey when the meeting ends. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.